Hello and welcome back to all of you lovely people. We're going to do another recording of 3 Continents of Awakening, and in this recording we're going to talk about doubt. And doubt is the second fetter. The first fetter is about non-identifying and non-self, and today we're going to talk about doubt. And before I start, I just would like if all of you could say your name and which continent you're sitting on, so people on Spotify can recognize your voices. My name is Pernille de Moor, and I'm Danish, but I live in the UK. I'm in Shrewsbury in the UK.
My name's Kathy, and I'm from Australia, small country town in Australia.
I'm Todd. I'm in New York in the US, on North America, and yeah.
I'm Vince. I'm in Australia.
I'm Leona. I'm on the south coast of England.
I'm Jeff. I'm on the west coast of North America, Canada.
It's me left.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Branimir, Vienna, Europe, Austria.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we're moving on to the second fetter, and the first fetter is about identifying, and it's very much about identifying with thought and becoming aware that the thoughts that we have are happening just like any other sensory experience that we have, that there's seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting and feeling, and then there's thoughts happening, selfing happening. In this fetter about doubt, the selfing is not about thoughts anymore. It's about emotion. So it's emotional selfing that is happening. And when we have doubt, doubt happens when we have an underlying belief about something, which we are either very much aware of is there, or which we have no idea is there. And then we can have just that sensation of doubt and not really knowing what it's about. But the common denominator for doubt is that it kind of stops us in our tracks. So there's no moving forward and there's no moving back. We're just standing still and really, really unsure on what to do. And we narrow our vision into thinking that there's a right thing and a wrong thing. And usually we only see it as that, like there's those two options. There's not like the thousands of options. There's only those two things, and we really want to do the right thing. So we're kind of narrowing ourselves in, and it's all about identification, and it's all about selfing. So not being aware of the complete delusion that we're in. And doubt is something that can really pop its head out so many times during the fetter process or during the awakening. I've also heard Angelo talk about that you can actually be quite far along in your process and be at the other side of the honeymoon period, and then all of a sudden you get overwhelmed by doubt. So it is really a thing that's great to look at, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And my idea is that I have 3 questions, and you can pick any one of them that you want to talk about. You can talk about all of them if you want to. And I'm obviously interested in your stories, but I'm also interested in hearing your experiences with doubt as guides, how you have managed doubt in the people that you've been guiding. And the first question is, in retrospect, did doubt hold you back from fully breaking any of the fetters? Because sometimes we can't move further on. We can't get along with the process because we're in that no movement, no back forth thing. We're just completely stuck and paralyzed in the doubt and I'm not moving anywhere. So the first question is about if you experienced, not being able to move forward because of doubt. The second, should we take all 3 questions now and then you just pick which one you want to talk about? Yeah, okay. The second question is, what do you no longer doubt? So what did you use to doubt? That is not an issue. You don't doubt that anymore. That's not an issue. And the third question is, what did you use to doubt that no longer hold any importance? So those are the questions. Off you go.
I guess I can start if nobody else wants to. I'm going to actually take the first question because that was, I kind of talked about this in our last meeting too. But as far as, holding back from breaking a fetter, the whole trip through the guiding through LU, through the first fetter was, I mean, it was like 9 months of working with a guide, and basically it was because there was so much chronic doubt about so many different parts of the process. I had huge amounts of expectations that I had picked up by watching a lot of videos, a lot of non-duality stuff, hearing a lot of people talk. There were expectations because of the type of pointers that we use in LU, and so some of them were pointing to like 6th fetter or 7th fetter type breakthroughs or insights, but those aren't needed to get through the first fetter of or the first 3 of LU. And so in some ways it was like we had worked with those, but then it didn't matter all that much that I hadn't had, complete subject-object dissolution or something like that. There were also some issues of when we were talking about cause and effect and things like that. I've always had a very rational, skeptical kind of mind. Well, okay, not entirely true. Through college, I did not always have a completely rational, skeptical mind. I was a little bit too far off into the fringes of believing just about anything that seemed enticing. Learning my lesson from that, I then swung very far the opposite direction. And so the intervening years have been really guarded against losing any sort of grip of reality, quote unquote. And so that was all a big factor in working through the first fetter, because even though it was very clear that there was no self there, there was so much, well, Pernilla, as you said, about having these underlying beliefs. I mean, I wasn't aware of it at the time, but there were so many underlying beliefs revolving around, low self-worth and imposter syndrome and, just even like my ability to consciously make rational choices about things like this, given my bad choices in college. So there were just layers upon layers of these doubts. And I know it was very frustrating for my guide because she was doing her best to keep me looking, and I had clearly seen that there was like no self, but there were all of these what ifs and all these comparisons. And basically the thing that I had said a couple times was like, it would have been really helpful to know, like, if a fetter breaks, like if all of your hair falls out or like your skin turns green or something. Like I wanted like really definitive, clear proof that is, but because everything is subjective, everything is in your own experience, nobody else can verify that for you. So I'm judging my own experience and putting it against all of these other experiences that I'm hearing other people relate. And so there was no place to land on that. And so it took a very long time before I had actually kind of had the insight enough to be able to see through that and accept the fact that I had really seen through self, and that all of this other was this kind of additional layer. And I know I had mentioned in the last meeting where, the kind of 2 parts of that were when I had a meeting with her and with my guide, and had realized as we were talking that there was nothing like there's nothing that I could ever know to be true, and that I don't know what's anything is true, and there's no way, the only thing that I believe is that I don't know what's true, basically. And that in itself was like a big relief and an insight. And then it was like a day or two later, I stumbled on a Robert Saltzman video where he basically said that there are certain things that are just unknowable and nobody can know them. And, you basically put down the search when you realize that. And that was just this huge weight that just lifted off. It was like something really clicked when I heard that. And that was kind of like the beginning of the end. And then again, there was still a period even after that when I was working with Christiane on 4 and 5, that some of the doubt came back regarding the first in, talking to her. And so I had to reinvestigate it again. So that was a very huge thing. And, it still comes back in different ways, not for the first Fetter anymore, or, 4 and 5 or any of that, but it's not a doubt-free life all the time. So it's been very helpful to go back and investigate some of these earlier beliefs that had just been accepted or never even noticed, or just taken as being part of the assumptions of what it's what it's like to be this personality or whatever. Like, it's just assumed that this is the way that things are, and breaking them down has been really instrumental in also breaking down those instances of doubt that arise. So
yeah, thank you. You're really, really touching on something that I think is so relevant, and that's the thing that since the doubt is happening, in the mind, it's selfing about something emotional. It's so difficult to break, because that it's the selfing that needs to verify that it's not real. I mean, that's like, it's such an ongoing loop that is just happening. And it's, of course, the selfing is not going to make yourself unemployed. It's like asking the politicians to decide what wages they should have. I mean, what a bad idea that is. It's like almost impossible to have the ego telling the ego that is not real. You don't need to doubt. There's nothing to doubt. Everything's fine, because it's not the job of the ego. So that problem that it needs to be verified by ourselves keeps us in that loop where there's no way out. There's no way out. Yeah. May I ask you something?
of course.
Because one of the things that I suggest when you work with doubt is that getting back to the body, because you cannot find any solutions in your mind, in your head at all, and you can completely stay yourself blind on emotions and feelings and wanting to solve them. And the only thing you can do with doubt is to find calm. It's why the antidote to doubt is calm. So it's that getting back to the body where you have the sensory experience of the body, and you have what I call the body yes and the body no, where you can feel which direction you want to do. And in that, while you're in the body and you have that joy of experiencing whatever's happening in the moment, then in that doubt usually dissolve itself. When you said that you started to see through the doubt and seeing it, was there anything about that? Did you do?
I think to a certain extent, yes. I hadn't at that point. I wasn't. Okay, so I didn't have that framework, so to speak. My guide did when we were working on this right from the beginning. A thing that she always puts out is that you can tell what's true or false based on the feelings in your body. And so if you have a contracted feeling, it's what you're saying is a lie. If it's expansive, it's open. The problem is, given my doubtful, skeptical nature, I had no way to verify that except just to take it on faith, which I was not really comfortable doing. So even though I would know certain things do lead to a more expansive state in the body, a more relaxed state, and others felt tighter and more contracted, taking that the extra step and saying that well, that means this is really true or this is not, was just something I also wasn't able to take on. And that being said, I have always had mine for as long as I can remember, a really good intuitive sense of when something feels right or not in the body. And as long as I'm following that, things usually go very well. When things are when that's tuned out, less so. And so some of it was that. Some of it is also being more aware as I was working through LU to that open, spacious kind of feeling. And even without taking on necessarily the framework that, well, this means it's truth, there was still something there that was a calming sensation in the body, that was relaxing, and it did dissolve the doubt. It would have been helpful to have had your your input on that back in those days, but yeah, I think that was actually a part of it, even though I wasn't doing that intentionally. Yeah, I was going to say something else in there, but I forgot. So if it comes back, I'll.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Can I say something what Todd mentioned?
Yeah.
I think the point that you said about expectation and comparisons, I think this is maybe Vince and others guides would know better because they're guiding, but I think this is a big deal. Also the question is, what is conditioning the doubt, basically, and there is always something there under some underlying belief, and a lot of it comes with these comparison expectations that we have, that we now read about and can hear a lot of people talking about duality, non-duality, and sharing their experiences. Then we want that to happen to us, right? Very in that way. So lots of it, I would say, comes also from that, not trusting our experience, basically, but just wanting something similar to happen to us. And then when most of the cases doesn't happen in the same way, it rarely happens. So, and then there is a doubt, and probably after that, frustrations. I don't know if that was. Do you have this experience with people that you're guiding?
100%. Yeah. Absolutely. That's why the biggest things when somebody comes in, the first things we ask are what expectations they have and what fears about the process do they have, because those are the two biggest holdups. And no matter how many expectations you kind of get out of the way in the beginning, they just keep coming back. There will be new things, just like, oh nope, that's also there's a new one, there's another one, because we all take in so much of this stuff from so many angles. And even we hear so many amazing stories, and even, let's face it, even the really mundane statements that we make still sound mystical. And like, even when we say that everything is the same way it was, just different, that alone still conjures up these ideas of something really, well, what's different about it, what's really, and so there's just so much expectation and so much comparison that
it's normal to some extent to have this expectation, right? That's just okay. Can I continue then?
Yeah, please.
What was the question? Yeah, I would go also with the first question, probably, right? Yeah, and then maybe later we can also reflect on others. But never thought about that, about doubt, before you mentioned that much. Yeah, probably, and then I reflected on it, and to some extent it popped up to my experience, but I never doubted after I had, I talked last time about the first awakening shift, initial awakening. So when I had that shift, that clear seeing, I never doubted that this is possible. Like, that was very clear, this is possible. Like, I knew, even though this was still not, there was a lot of work to be done, I definitely was 100% sure that this should happen, it can happen, but I don't know, I didn't know how and when, or but definitely doubt was, from that point on, doubt was never big part of the process, I would say. But before that, I don't know. I just, for me it's different than Todd, probably because I discovered all this awakening 2-3 months before the shift happened. So probably the doubt didn't play a huge role in all this experience in my case. But and I would go back. I mean, definitely, it, it's, I think the key is to look what is conditioning this doubt. There probably are different things for each of us. So I cannot say much about that. But I don't know about later shifts. Definitely, there was no big gap between the first shift and then when the non-duality is starting to dissolve. I think few months it passed. I don't remember exactly how. So, but also between them, there was some mystical experience, so to say, or some kind of deepening. But then when the non-dual kind of first subject started to dissolve and started to experience this, then there was I don't know, all doubts probably at that point dissolved. And then I was very clear that this is, the people who talk about it, that's definitely makes sense. And yeah.
So may I ask you something, Branimir?
Yeah, sure.
So if you should look at the difference before and after regarding doubt, what is different regarding the way that you are in the world with doubt? What did you use to doubt that is not, really anything to doubt anymore?
I mean, I think this could, with enough curiosity. I mean, this is now. I never didn't guide. Don't have that experience, but with enough curiosity and willingness to just trust your own experience and intuition, and to learn how to trust that. Not read many books about awakening. And a few of them is okay, but not too many. I think definitely can happen to anyone, because it's not depending on you. There is no you here, and there is no such a structure here. So it's a complex process to some extent, but that also makes it beautiful and it's possible. So definitely, I think this can happen too. With enough curiosity and really willingness to do that, it can happen to anyone. But there are probably many other things I don't doubt. But I cannot now. They will come up.
Yeah, that's a great segue into my story. If it's time.
Yeah, go on.
Yep. I want to go back to the searching, the seeking part. For me, that was a really long time. In retrospect, I was a seeker for 43 years. So a lot of things changed over that time, and it wasn't until, well, even in the early days, there was this idea of enlightenment. And when I look back on it now, I can recognize that I had this story that only special people could get enlightened. And I was arrogant enough to think that I was one of those special people. But along with that came the idea that I would have to go to India and I would have to I would have to be another Gandhi or whatever, you know. There were requirements for that specialness to kick in that it seemed wasn't going to happen anyway. But so you can see this, there's this story about me, this really strong story about whatever, and that question continued all the way through my seeking years, and that is this Vince is it possible for him to wake up? Is it possible for him to get enlightened? Was the way it was in the earlier days and only later. So this is me really concretizing who I am all the way through. That was the basis of all of the seeking, was that. And it wasn't until the last 2 years, I suppose, of that seeking period that the idea of enlightenment changed, and the idea of needing specialness to get there changed. And as much as I think a lot of the non-dual Advaita stuff is really, really religious in tone and doesn't do anybody any favors, it did me a big favor, and that was that it gave me the possibility that ordinary people can wake up. That was a huge thing. No longer did I need to go to India to do it. No longer did I need to meditate 24 hours a day or go and live in a cave or whatever those special requirements used to be. That was all gone now. So now I know that it's possible for ordinary people to do it. One of the later obsessions I had about this was listening to the Jed McKenna books on audio books. I listened to them repeatedly, and I would get high listening to them. I would get really high because here again, this bloke was saying, yeah, you can have this, anybody can have this, you know. So it was like the specialness had gone and the ordinariness was okay. In this seeking, but still the doubts were present in other beliefs, and the big belief was, are we there yet? Are we there? How long is this going to take? It was always that future orientation, and I could never pin down the day that it was going to happen for me, because every time I moved a day forward, it moved a day forward. I could never catch up with it. So it was always going to happen in the future. So that was doubt about the present. That was doubt about now. So now jump through to after awakening, and probably only about 3 months, and this is a very faulty memory, only about 3 months after waking up, I went into a doubt period that lasted for maybe 6 months. And I'm thinking, Penella, your definitions of doubt about thinking doubt and emotional doubt, and I can't kind of separate those two for that period for me, where that period of doubting was looking. I could go back and look at my blog at the time and see what I wrote about it, but I don't. But from memory, not doing that, and I don't want to do that. Just from memory, that doubt was about me having an episode, me having been triggered into some kind of episode, some intensely unpleasant emotional state over something, and I don't really remember what it was, but it doesn't matter. But anyway, so that and the mind coming in saying, well, you can't be awake if you're going to react like that. That I think was the crux of that doubt, and I don't remember what resolved it. There was no single statement. There was no recognition that doubt is just obsessive thoughts doing their thing. I don't know what it was, but anyway, it went away, and there was years after that. There was 10 years after that of being really relaxed in the knowing, the knowing that there's nothing to know, and this occurs to me as well, that doubt is a thought process that is seeking to know something. So having relaxed into this wonderful place of don't know, don't need to know, don't care, what's here is what it's all about, whatever. So that eliminates doubt. It's just doubt can't exist. So then when I'm guiding and we talk about people that have doubts, and one guide frequently, I say frequently, a couple of times has asked me to take over somebody because they've had doubts. And when I do, doubts don't seem to figure in it anywhere. It's like I don't recognize doubts, so that what they are, what other people call doubts, are just what's happening that needs to be looked at a bit closer. So I can't kind of isolate them and call them doubts, really, but I guess they are at one level, from one perspective. Okay, that's me.
Thank you. It's very much about that underlying belief, that there's something that is not right, that it's always the +1 game. Like you said, it's a constant chasing of something else than what is. And what is not right. This is not right. It should feel different or be different or be experienced different, or this can't be it. And that ego game that we play with, that +1 game, we're obviously never gonna reach it, because +1, it's a great game to play. But it's about that underlying belief that there's something wrong with right now. That there is something else than right now.
Yeah. And I'll get it tomorrow.
Thank you. Yeah, Kathy?
That touches into something that's been quite live for me over the years, which is around hope. I think doubt and hope can be close bedfellows. I don't know what to call them, how they go together.
Yes, I agree.
Because, and also I suppose faith, it does all come back to whether or not it's possible to end or at least soften suffering. And there's a subtle sort of mechanism, I don't think it's a mechanism, but there's something that kind of operates that can be hard to see clearly, that you know, when you get a taste of freedom, that you sort of hope that there's more of that to come. And actually, even though that's quite reasonable on one level, on another level, what it does is move you out of the present moment. Or not move you out of the present moment, because that's not possible. But what it does is it's like a subtle thing to sort of change your experience of the present moment. You know, I want something, i.e. the end of suffering, the end of the feelings that operate, but they're here. So I really hope that they can go. It's a way of relating to, you know, perhaps spiritual teachings that you find. And then because that hope doesn't sort of, all it does is kind of put something different into your current experience, then when your experience changes again, it can be easy to doubt, oh, well, because I wanted that, or because I thought that was possible, and now I feel X, that means what I wanted wasn't possible. So yeah, I don't know. It's like, I think it's another side of the coin of hoping that can be quite sort of subtle. But then also I think it's useful to still, I think there's a lot about doubt that can be confusing to look at. And I know for me that what's been tied up with it over the years is, on the one hand, like Todd was saying, wanting to be discerning about things. Like, it's not that you have to suspend you know, your kind of common sense in this to some extent. And it's not that you have to suspend your intellect. Like, there's still a role for being discerning about things. So that can feel like the perplexity side of things is not permitted or something, that like that therefore you must just, like, any level of intellectual inquiry is somehow missing the point or not the game. But actually I think it can be helpful. But what's important is to see that that's the level that it's operating on. And then I think there's another layer that can be present for me, and I think it's probably fairly common, which is also tied up in expectations. And that is what you might call the feeling doubts. I think the feeling side of doubt, Pernilla, which is to some extent the more neurotic side of it. Well, here's someone describing something that I really want, I can't have it. I know for me over the years, I've had that in operation without really seeing it clearly as doubt. You know, particularly being involved in doing quite a lot of practice, meditation and other things. And I always had this sense that the freedom from suffering wouldn't be available to me because I wouldn't put the work in. I can't have what other people have. You know, things that sort of operate around a sense of self-worth or self-capacity, not being good enough or capable enough to achieve what other people achieve. And what really, and that, you know, I was sort of thinking about this topic and like changing my Zoom name to Doubty McDoubtface because it has been such a theme over my life. You know, it feels like pretty familiar territory. And I remember the relief of discovering, this is like 20 years ago now, going through a lot of anger. And I remember making this commitment to my partner at the time of saying, I don't know how I'm going to find a way through this, but I promise you I'm going to find a way to stop being as angry as I am. And I think I was on the bus into work in Sydney and I saw this sign outside the Sydney Buddhist Centre about learn to meditate. And the only experience of meditation that I'd had before that was this guy, Barry Long. You guys probably know him. I had this tape that someone gave me, and I was listening to it. I was living in this little cabin. This is years before the bus trip in Sydney, living in this little cabin in the mountains and on my own. And I put this tape in the tape player, the cassette player. That's how long ago it was. I closed my eyes and I listened to Barry Long, and it started to feel reasonably peaceful. And then he said one thing that just made me throw the tape away, actually. He talked about coming into contact with parts of yourself that were the bad parts. And he called it the inner pygmy. And I went, okay, racist, see you later. Like, because of that one thing, I actually just, I collapsed that one sort of racist analogy into a whole thing about, oh, this is all bullshit, you know, which seems incredible to think back on now. But anyway, so there I was years later on the bus in Sydney seeing this Learn to Meditate thing. And I thought, oh, I'll give that a go, because I was desperate to find a way out of anger. And I started straight away I went to this course that was operating every Wednesday or Tuesday night. And immediately, because it wasn't, you know, and I remember walking through the door of the Sydney Buddhist Centre going, oh God, I hope they don't go on with that Buddhist religious stuff. And they didn't, because I didn't realise at all what Buddhism was and what that particular flavour of Buddhism was. And all that happened was I sat down and followed the instructions of the teacher about just following my breath. There was nothing religious about that. And I started to feel a little bit calm, but not overly. And then I walked out of the Buddhist Centre into the night, and I just noticed that colours were more intense and that I felt calmer. And I went home and I sat on the lounge and I started talking to my partner, and I still felt calm. And I went, oh, wow, maybe there's something here. And the feeling of relief, I can almost get tears in my eyes just recalling that memory, that maybe there's a way to not just be this, what I felt was this sort of destructive force in the world due to like my anger and the way that I thought I was with people. And then so I really kept going with it, and I started to do just 10 minutes at home and kept going to the course, kept going to the Buddhist Centre, but still really felt like I don't want to hear any religious stuff. And again, didn't realise that what I was hearing from the way the teachings wasn't religious stuff. It was actually just an explanation of how you can work with your own mental states. So I started to have some experiences in meditation. And I thought, oh, well, this is Buddhism's thing. I wonder what it's got to say about what was going on for me. And so even though I had like this, I think it was a level of doubt around what I called the religious stuff. It was a misunderstanding, really. And so what kind of snuck in the back door was the religious stuff, because it was explaining things that were going on for me. And it wasn't religious in the sense of deferring to a higher being or any of that sort of stuff. I'd grown up as a Catholic and didn't kind of want any of that. So that gave me a sense of faith, but not faith in a religion, just faith in the sense that maybe there are people who've explored this in the past who know a lot more about it than I do. And that was enough to help me keep going, despite still having this mechanism operating all the time, it felt like, of feeling like, oh, well, I can't have this. And what people are talking about is so remote in terms of ending suffering. That will never happen for me for one reason or another. And it was kind of odd that I could have this level of faith and trust in what people were able to guide me through, at the same time as having this quite intense level of doubt about, you know, whether anything would ultimately crack open for me. And that really continued until like, and, you know, it continued through it continued a bit around seeing through the illusion of self, but that was actually fairly easy to clear up by the time I went to LU. So there was a question in my guiding, which was, you know, is there, you know, something about, is there a self, and can you say confidently without any doubt that there's not? And I was clear about that. Yeah, you know, there's not. But still this sense of suffering kept going. And so it got to the point where I thought, well, what is the use of all of this if there's still suffering? You know, maybe none of this is actually true. And true in the sense of, you know, there's no real way to be free of suffering. Even though my life had gotten a lot better in so many ways, I did have more positive mental states. There was no doubt about that. I always felt drawn to the awakening side of things, meaning like some permanent sense of freedom, some permanent sense of not suffering. And it wasn't until I encountered, and this is only, so this, like as I said, that story was 20 years ago of learning to meditate, and, you know, life got much better. But the thing that really exposed doubt much more clearly was only in recent years, listening to something of Angelo DeLullo's, where he pointed out that doubt was a thought. And that's all it took for me to have, wow, well, let's have a look at that. You know, this feeling of doubt that I have, when it comes up, what is it? And it was always thinking, but thinking with a charge, like thinking with a sense of me in it. And then he also pointed out, I'll probably get this a bit wrong, he also pointed out that the doubt thought can be harder to see the belief tied up in it, because it touches into the experiences that really feel like me, and they're around self-doubt. So that's not just about doubt around awakening, that's around doubt that, you know, operates within us to a greater or lesser extent. And again, I went, okay, that makes a lot of sense. It feels like a charged thought when it comes up. But then pointing to what is, you know, is there something that is doubtless in my experience? Like, can the thought be there? And it's a thought of doubt, and it's a feeling of doubt. But what is actually doubtless? And that, I think, brings to, like, that's where I can relate to what you talk about, Pernilla, around the antidote being calm and coming into the body. Because even with strong doubt operating, like a loud thought or a series of thoughts allegedly being triggered by each other that feel like doubt, there's always something else there that's doubtless. And that seems to be around direct experience, but not individual sensations. Like, that's part of it. But the circuit breaker for the thinking is actually looking at what is doubtless, what's always here that's doubtless. And straight away, that brings me into contact with something that it's like, it's not just doubtless in the sense of, oh, there's doubt, that's pointing to something that seems to be wrong now, and here's something that's true. It actually points to something that's beyond, that doubt isn't even able to operate in.
I love that. I really, really love that. It's what I normally call it is finding into the joy of experiencing. Because in the joy of experiencing, you are present and aware of what is happening right now, and there's no opinion about things being different. than what it is right now. So that is a doubtless state, because no matter what is, there's always a joy in experiencing it. You know, there's always that curiosity in experiencing it. And in that, there's that, you know, pure being that, exactly like I say, it's doubtless. I really, really love that. Really, really love that. And you, another thing that you touched on. Oh, sorry, Vince. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was getting hung up on doubtless. It's doubtless if you freeze shot and describe. It's only doubtless in the description. The actual experience of it, there's no such thing as doubt or doubtless. It's non-existent. It's only when we try and describe it that we can add the overlay that there were no doubts there.
Do you mean?
I thought that was profound, and it's not.
Do you mean the state? Do you mean the state where you can't put a label on it and saying that it is doubt or it is doubtless? Is that what you're talking about? Because
Yeah, saying that the doubt or doubtless is only in the label. It's not in the experience.
Yeah.
There is no doubt or doubtless in the experience.
No, I agree. I think that what we're talking about when we're talking about doubt is that that hook into an underlying belief where there is always that option, and then you can, the only place that you can put yourself in where it is doubtless, it's kind of like going into the gap. There's always, in all the fetters, there's always a gap. There's always the space where it's not one and not the other. It's in the middle, where there's no hard reaction to anything, but you can see things from a space where it's not charged in any way. So in all the fetters, there's always a gap. And I think what Kathy's pointing out regarding doubt, that is exactly putting yourself in the space where it is doubtless. There's not a label that you can put on it that puts it in a category for you to doubt it. You're completely right, Vince, zooming out and looking from you know, higher above, or how you can say it. You're completely right. You can't put a label on anything, and there can't be doubt and there can't be the doubtless. But I think we're looking more pixelated to what the experience actually is. And I think a lot of times it's necessary to do that, because like Kathy said, that was the other thing I wanted to point out, that sense of self that we can have or not have, and the self-worth that we can have or not have, and self-esteem that we can have or not have, and clear boundaries that we can have and not have, that just places us in a limbo about doubt all the time. So I think it's really important to look at all those identifications that we make, where we, for some reason, always, you know, pull the short straw. We're always on the losing end of it. So yes, there's no me, but the me that is not here has really, really low worth. You know, it's just like, yeah.
For me, I think that doubt arises if there's a lack of clarity or confusion or uncertainty. And then doubt comes in because there's no clarity on something. And when you can understand something clearly, there is no doubt.
Yes.
So if you don't have the clarity, what can you do? Because we can't always have clarity on something. We can't always find the answer to something. So then if we can't do that, we have to just surrender and trust in life. So for me, the answer is, well, if you can't find clarity, you just have to trust that things are the way they are and be comfortable with that until something else shows up.
Yes.
So doubt really comes from expectations as well, because there's a lack of understanding with expectations.
Yeah, or there might be, you know, an underlying emotion that we're not even aware of is there, like low self-worth. There's that underlying emotion that we're not aware of, which places us in a space where there's no clarity about anything, because we think that worth or esteem is part of the answer and part of the solution, where it can't be.
I had
There's another.
a lack of clarity when, so I had about 3 awakening episodes, and the first 2 didn't involve LU, and they were just completely spontaneous and natural. And I had no expectations in any of that, so I was perfectly happy. I'd never labeled them as waking up or anything, but one of them certainly felt like it. I felt it was an enlightenment experience, but I went with the flow, and I had nothing attached to it. And then I went to LU. And then came the doubt, because it's loaded with expectations. And also I kind of came with the expectations. I've got to the point in my life where it's do or die for me. Either I break through this barrier that I sense is holding me back in some way, or what's the point of life if that can't be broken through? So I knew something was looming. So when I had a guide, and I had my 6 questions, obviously we had to look at expectations, and then I ended up with my 6 final questions. You know, even before I came there was absolutely no doubt that the self didn't exist as I had thought, and it was a concept. So there was no doubt in that. So I knew that I was ready to, you know, I'd gone through the gate and stuff, but the 6 questions, not all of them really made complete sense to me. Conceptually, yeah. And I did talk at length with my guide about the things that I weren't clear on. And I kind of got what she was saying, but, you know, and then there was a dropping away of something, and I had this final shift, and I oscillated. So I was obviously, the oscillation, I think was because I was in a temporary state that felt so free and open, and I could feel energy through my arms flowing from my heart along the heart meridian, and for quite a long time. And then I would oscillate, and then I'd have such doubts. Oh my God, I've lost it. I've lost my awakening. So I was obviously attached to that, and I was desperate when I wasn't in it. It was like a light switch that kept going on and off for a period of time. And that brought a huge amount of doubt when I wasn't feeling awakened. And it was a bit stressful, because there was a fear that it wouldn't come back. And that caused a lot of doubt in me. But now that I'm further along the road, I find that, you know, ultimately, everything that happens to me is perfectly fine. And I so completely trust in life now that I can just let go and trust in life, because I know it brings me everything I need, the exact moment that I need it. So, you know, if doubt does arise, and I, in a way, I'm even not sure doubt is the right word. It's just there might be a lack of clarity around something, or I just need to understand something in myself a bit better, rather than labeling it as doubt. And sometimes I can't understand everything because I'm complicated. And so I just have to trust in life and just be okay with that and sit in that. And ultimately, things always unravel. What we need comes to us, always in the end. And I've really learned that it's absolutely fine, and that I don't have to worry anymore and doubt myself like I used to, because I suppose pre-waking up, I was like, well, my God, I don't know that it's any easier now. It's just really different. I mean, I've had really difficult times having been awoken up, you know, going through fetters 4 and 5, and everything, all the traumas come up and stuff. It's not a bloody, it should come with a government warning, because in some ways it's much harder, because you cannot, I've got absolutely no filter in my brain to stop any difficult feelings, and I have to look directly at them and address them. And I have absolutely no choice in the matter, or I'll be completely miserable and start resisting it. And I can't do that. It doesn't get me anywhere, resistance. I have to be open willing to look at everything and sit with everything and feel everything. And in a way, that's what you're saying with doubt as well. So the whole, whatever you want to label difficult feelings as, do not resist them, embrace them, and just allow them and have compassion, and you're good to go. So it's not really that simple, but you know, that's a basic premise that I kind of live by in a way.
I absolutely love that. I love that, Leona. Thank you so much. Especially the part about when we want something to sort itself out. You know, we sit in a confusion and we do not want this confusion, and we want to find the solution. So we, you know, instead of being very pokey and wanting to find it now, then just leaning back and going, well, if I can't see the solution right now, I'm not supposed to see a solution right now. So I'm just, you know, leaning back and waiting for the solution to rock off.
Yeah. And not just that, absolutely agree. And not just that, even allow yourself to explore those feelings of discomfort inside on top of it, because they're telling you something. They're so valuable. Every emotion is highlighting something that needs to be looked at that you're not addressing.
Yes.
And so this journey is not for the faint-hearted. And you need, well, for me, in my life and the way my brain is structured, I need to address absolutely everything. And there's no dodging it.
Yeah. I love it. It's one of the mantras that I just keep repeating over and over and over in the teachings, that whenever you have a feeling, you don't need to do anything. All you need to do is feel it. It's the only thing you need to do with a feeling. You know, just feel it. And there's always huge insights into just allowing, creating space and being compassionate with whatever you feel. Love that. Love that. Thank you.
Something that you said, Leona, brought up for me another one that I didn't mention earlier, was being happy not knowing anything. I have this kind of conceptual thing about things arise out of a great mystery, and they're here as experience, and then they disappear back into that great mystery, and we just don't know. And I'm really happy living with this huge, great mystery right next to me or around me or in me or whatever. And that not knowing is so relaxing, so absolutely relaxing when it comes to the mind saying, I want to know about that. And you go, oh, fuck off. There's no need whatsoever.
That was also what Todd was talking about earlier, that you're not supposed to know everything. There's so many things that we're not supposed to know. There's so many things that we will never know, that our puny minds cannot understand.
Yeah. Well, that's about 99.9%, I think, of what goes on.
But still, you know that you don't know. Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. In fact, it's great. It's really
that's
good.
great,
It's
actually.
free. Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
It makes me want to hear from Jeff, because I think we're getting into the territory where not only can we not know about things, the content of our thought and our language in particular, can it even point to anything out there or in here?
Yeah, I agree.
The interesting thing about doubt is that for me, I guess I've always been analytical and philosophical, and there were certain nagging contradictions or unresolved propositions or beliefs that I couldn't work out. And one of them was, if the contents of thought don't appear in experience, how do we know there are contents? It seems like we are aware that thought has contents. It seems like those contents appear to us, but I've never been able to find contents outside of a thought. And finally, that's what broke it for me, broke the whole system, which was necessary. So I would have said, well, I did say I had doubts because there was no clear awakening event. I just noticed I wasn't suffering. And I still had doubts, even though conceptually I could see there was no self. That was very clear. But the doubts kept arising. Well, finally, grappling with these contradictions, thought itself broke completely and finally. And I saw that thoughts don't ever refer to anything that aren't thoughts. And thoughts don't refer to experience. They don't touch it. There's no, they're not even related. And that experience is undoubtable. And where am I going with this?
It's fantastic.
Sorry.
Experience is undoubtable is a better way than saying doubtless, really.
Yeah.
What's doubtless? Yeah.
Undoubtable.
Undoubtable.
And that in that world, the doubt doesn't apply, as Vince noted. It just doesn't it just doesn't refer to anything. So things are so simple because there's just experience. These things we call thoughts are things we split off from thought with thought. I mean, it's just a hall of mirrors again. And so there's no real possibility of taking any thought seriously anymore. I don't know. So much for doubt.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's also where it kind of lands, because what I said with doubt being very much about feelings and emotions and all of that, you cannot have a feeling or emotion without a thought attached to it, telling you what that feeling or emotion is. Otherwise, it's just, sensations that is happening, and there's no label on it. So it's just sensation. There's no label. There's no sadness or anger or guilt or shame or anything. It's just a physical sensation. It's the label on it that is, which the thoughts are making it into an issue that is then, bigger than what it actually is. But in reality, as you say, it's like the question I always ask: what happens to a thought when you don't think it? Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to ask Jeff this: when it's interesting with thought, because the carrier is the content, or rather the content is the carrier with a thought. So when we say the contents of thought, it's the thought itself. And to play this funny game, we can say we do experience having a thought, right? There's a thought appears, and if we're aware of it, then there's an experience happening. And if that thought is about something that triggers us in particular, or even if it's fairly benign, we will have a response to that thought. That response to that thought is another experience. So we experience what we think of the thought is another way to put it. So there is in my mind a connection between the thought and experience. But of course we have to say this if we're referring to, let's call it direct experience, that is the experience that is before thoughts arrive about it, then that's a different thing altogether in a way, you know. But yeah.
Yeah, that's the distinction, that when we're talking about that experience, which is before all thought, then it, you know, that's the end.
The thought always arrives, even with almost every experience. Thought will arrive, and then we'll respond to the thought, and with another experience, which will bring in another thought that we'll respond to, and so on.
Yeah, and you only know that in thought.
Yeah,
I mean, those are thoughts telling
well, when you think about it,
are connected and whatever. But I don't know why I want to bring this up, but I was working with a client and I said, let's look at death. Tell me about, you know, death. And he said, well, really, I have no idea what that's like or what that is. And I thought, actually, it's very simple. And you know, I didn't get to this point because he actually said, I'm having anxiety and I need to take a break for a week. So to be continued, I guess. But the point I wanted to make to him is, if there's no experience, then what are we talking about? That you know, there's nothing there. And if there is experience, well, we already know there's just experience. So there are no, in that sense, everything is a mystery, and there are no mysteries because it's always going to be just experience.
Yeah, that was exactly my point before, that the emotion that arises afterwards is a thought, because the experience is just what is happening. That's a sensory experience that we can have. But if there's no label on it, then it's not anxiety, and it's not depression, and it's not fear or anger or guilt or shame or anything. It's just an experience. And that in itself cannot provoke anything into anything, because it just is. There needs to be thoughts attached to it, and then stories are created out of the thoughts, which is no longer about the direct experience.
So when we're really comfortable with experience, really comfortable, as Leona and Vince have talked about, then we're home, basically, right? Where the work is done.
Yeah.
then it's all play.
Well, yeah, for sure.
But it's also that space where whatever happens is completely fine, and that's where the undoubtable experiences are, where everything that happens is fine. There's no preferences to one thing or the other. There's just that joy with experiencing, whatever it is that experiencing is.
You can also be having a bad experience and not doubt something.
Pardon?
You can also have a bad experience and don't have a doubt about something.
Exactly. Exactly, because the label saying that an experience is good or bad is already a label. The experience is just what is.
I didn't have any doubts when I broke Fetter 1 because it was a thing. It was not conceptual. I didn't have to think about it to be sure there was no self. I just had to look, so I didn't have doubts about that.
Exactly.
Yeah. With Feather 4-5, it's different. I can see there's no desire or ill will, but it seems that the way to know that you've break it is to have a decrease of some kinds of experiences. So you have to wait and see what's going on to understand if you break it or not. And I have doubts because of that. It's not about the seeing, it's about how the seeing affects your daily life. So you have to wait. It's not just the looking, it's seeing the effects. And I think that creates doubts because you have to understand if what you're experiencing matches what is supposed to happen when you break the 4 and 5 feather. And that makes me feel like I'm in a big ocean, not knowing what's going on, because there's no points of reference. It's like being in a soup being cooked without knowing what's the point where it's done. So
Oh wow. Wow. It's you can never know. How can you ever know? I went through 10 years feeling really confident, then all of a sudden I went, oh,
but
maybe
I
there's
knew when I saw there is no self. It was a seeing and a knowing,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I
get what
couldn't
you're
go
saying.
back. It was done. And with 4-5, it's like, what's going on? I don't know. I don't know where I am. What's going on? I don't understand what's going on.
But
So
you'll never
it's
know.
funny.
You'll never know. You can't know. It's
They say you
impossible.
will know when it breaks because you don't doubt it, so you know.
Yeah.
And I think it's very funny because when with my LU clients, I go, why? How can you doubt this? It's so obvious. You can find it. You can see it. It's in our face. But with Feather 4 and 5, it's not like that to me. I can see desire. I can see ill will or anything like that. But I'm still waiting for the shoe to drop. It's ridiculous, but it's like that. I don't feel like it's done. Even with the
your
even
doubts
with
are
the
tied,
even if
your
I
doubts are
see
tied up with sorry. Yeah.
even if I can see clearly, I still doubt because it seems that something needs to happen and change. So I'm sure that it broke, you know. So I'm waiting.
So your doubts are tied up with expectations.
No.
But you're expecting something to happen.
Yes. 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 I'm waiting for something to happen.
Yeah. I mean, Kevin mentioned that for him, with I think in the interview with Angela, that for him was like a sudden realization that there is no reason to react. And that was like, it was gone, the whole reactivity, right? I just remember that I stopped reacting to situations in which I used to react before. And the biggest example or the best example was, I mean, that was also very sudden situation in which I was walking down the street and and some person yelled at me and for no reason, and also it was slightly violent. So I just looked at it and just continued going. I didn't react. Nothing happened, basically. I just thought about it 5 minutes and just realized that there was zero reaction. Neither anger came up or something similar. But this was a process. I wouldn't say that it happened like Karen described. It was a process of working with it, not reacting, but definitely there's no doubt about it. No.
So you didn't experience an actual shift that you're
No,
aware
actual
of?
shift, like Karen described it, not then later it was very clear to me there's no reason to react, but not working in that way. Just working in a way that just be aware of the initial sensation and not reacting. Just, I don't know why I did that, just was doing like that. But then always was curiosity, probably along the way, if there was something there, like to react or not. But then it was clear there was nothing, but not like Karen described in the interview, that there was like really looking for a reason to react, or a trigger to react all the time. You know, just I noticed that it was not there anymore in this situation that I used to react, and then it was a realization, okay, but there was not also like why I reacted, like there is nothing there. There was never had been there any trigger, any reason to react. So that happened like that in a way. It would be much, I mean, if I had the pointer, I don't know, if I knew the pointer that Karen of explaining Angela's videos, yeah, then that would be better. It would probably, I don't know how long it would take, but yeah, definitely it was different, yeah.
With Fetter one, I had a big curiosity. I was very curious and very excited, like a child that was discovering something new. With the 4 and 5, it's different because of I'm looking for something, but at the same time, I know this is okay as it is. So there's no, the pull to be curious is not there as strong as it was with Fetter one. And maybe that makes things go slower. I don't know.
Maybe it's going at the right pace for you.
Yeah, maybe.
I think it's super interesting to look into that expectation, because I think that is really, that's such a strong doubt energy, you know, that we have this expectation about something should happen or should be different or should feel in a certain way, or
But with Feather 4 and 5, they tell you will start not reacting as you did before. So you are expecting something to change. And you have to wait for life situations that will let you know that there was a change. So you're always waiting for something to happen to see if you react or not as you did before, and if something changes. So
and it can be really hard. It can be really hard to notice as well, because if you're not reacting to something, you don't think anything of it, and you just carry on. And then suddenly you think, oh my God, didn't react to that.
It's where I really love Kathy's expression with poking the bear to see if it's still not there.
But if you get on with life just while you're waiting, just get on with life. Is waiting happening?
Can you ever be waiting?
I'm going to get that on a t-shirt for you, Pernilla.
Thank you. I'm going to wear that with pride.
Yes.
Do you think maybe, Sandra, it's because you see through it so conceptually, so clearly that that it cannot be a shift for you anymore? In other words, you see that there's no trigger there.
If I look, I can see there isn't, but
So you're not going to have a sudden realization where you say, "Oh, I see it now."
oh, okay, I see what you mean.
So I guess what that means is life's going to continue as it's going to continue, and you can accept it or you can resist it.
Yeah.
And after 25 years of waiting, you'll still be saying, are we there yet?
No, because when this one breaks, there comes the next. Feather 6, okay? And I will start looking to objects and thinking, am I a subject here, seeing an object there? And there is. So,
And just to share like a counter experience to like Jeff, what you just said, because that was basically my experience with the first Fetter. Was I had had 20 years of conceptual understanding of it, and these kind of many years of gradual insights into it. And so there wasn't a big shift in the end, which also led to the doubt of, well, was this really it or not? But with 4 and 5, I had a strong conceptual understanding that they weren't there, and yet there was a much more drastic and physically tangible shift in 4 and 5 than there was in 1, even with having that. So I think it can, we just don't know. Like, it's not to say, Sandra, that you will or you won't. It's just like, I don't know. I don't think we can I don't think we can project how any of this stuff is going to happen, because I had a couple sizable shifts with working with the 4 and 5 sentences and stuff. They were weak for months, and really thought, well, maybe they were gone. And then I just had that like one final big one that seems to have been, and there's been really nothing since. So
would you describe that, Todd?
Yeah, it was just the physical, tangible sense of it was the kind of image metaphor that comes to mind is like two like double open windows that just like swing out, and this just air just comes in, and there was a real flash of, well, of course there's no, because that was on the subject of lack, because it was just, of course that doesn't, and it was just this like whew, and just everything released, and it just felt. And then like I remember the next day it was like things would start to pop up that would have been like a trigger, and it just felt like my two metaphors for that were that it was like a lawnmower that tried to rev but just couldn't start, or like a greased, like an oil pan that something just stuck, flopped to and then just slid right off, and it was like no reaction would just start. It was just like, oh no, there's a little bubble of sensation and that was it. And now even that generally doesn't happen. So it's like, it's good. And thankfully, like Vince said about getting on with your life, life has been giving me lots of tests, lots of chances to see, and thankfully so far so good. So yeah, but again, like
I want a t-shirt that says, it's great that shit happens.
It's true. No, it's totally true. I mean, this
and
whole
also,
like
sorry, just to say that Christiana says that Fetter, you can never be sure Fetter 5 is broken anyway until you've broken Fetter 8.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a great aha moment. I had to work with every minutiae of reactivity that came my way until it just got weaker and weaker and weaker, and then it became more subtle and obtruse. It was really hard to work with, and I think that happens quite frequently with people, that it becomes so tenuous to even find out, to even inquire into what the reactivity is, until suddenly it's just sort of gone. But for me, it wasn't a aha moment, but yeah, it was a bit more complicated for me, but I'm apparently I'm through, which is a new thing.
Mm.
Nice. And I have to say, Fetter 6 is so much more fun. Oh my God, it's like relief. I'm just like, oh, I'm loving this one.
It's interesting, isn't it, that in the Fetter model, it says that doubt falls with seeing through Fetter 1, the illusion of self. But then here we are talking about it much further down the fetters.
It's not my experience at all that that doubt, and also the harmful routines. It's not my experience at all that falls with the first one. I am aware that it's about identification. So the first one is about identification with thought. Doubt is about identification with emotions, and the third one is about identifications with purpose, with the things that we do, you know, do, say, and can, you know, that for that type of identification. So all three is about identification, but it's just different angles of that identification. And in my experience, it doesn't fall on its own. It's something that keeps popping its ugly face up, because that underlying belief, it's so tied into our conditioning. You know, whatever you were taught as a 5-year-old is part of it. And it just keeps resurfacing, you know. So, and that's why I think it's super important to work with, and also to return to when we work with the 4 and 5, and when we work with the 8. It is, yeah, the gift that keeps on giving.
I was always under the impression from the Buddhist standpoint that it was primarily the doubt in the teachings and the Dharma that fall, because once you see through the self, it's like, oh, there's something there. Like there's something really here. And I can see that what's being taught is true. And now I'm not going to doubt the Dharma, and I'm going to continue. So that makes sense from that standpoint.
Yeah, okay.
But I also wanted to ask, so Pernilla, like, and then others as well, but like when Christiana and a lot of other people say, with the first fetter particularly, if you have any doubt of whether you've had a shift, you haven't had a shift. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree.
So
I don't know what to say.
well, but that's the question, is, so would you say that if you have a doubt about any of the shifts, regardless of the fetter, that the shift definitely hasn't happened yet? Or is it a possibility that there's some layer of this kind of presently recurring doubt that might be coming from like a deeper issue of you know, some old unexamined belief?
Yeah, now I understand the question. Yeah, it's, in my experience, it's not so much about the fetter. The fetter is just a construct. It's just for us to have, you know, something to talk about and work with. The underlying beliefs and the underlying emotions that we have, and the underlying motivation that we have, that is what is the real thing. So when you have a doubt about if you have, you know, if the 5th fetter has fallen, it's not about the 5th fetter. It's about that underlying belief that you have, that it is not happening for me. It has happened for everyone else. It's not happening for me. Then look into, okay, where did I remember this feeling the first time? You know, that it's never happens to me. It's always everybody else. And my sister always get all the good gifts, and I never get that. So you start to see that, okay, there's actually a pattern here that has nothing to do with the 5th fetter, but it's that underlying belief where there's an emotion tied into it. So the fetters are never really the issue or the topic, or it's also why I can talk fetters with Angelo. He didn't use the fetter model to become awake, but when you look at it in retrospect, you can see where the fetters fit into the experience that we had. But the fetter model is only to have some kind of template or guideline to what we're working with. So the doubt is always an indication that there's something that we need to stop and look at, really be aware of what is the underlying motivation for this, and where do I recognize it? What is this about?
Yeah. I mean, it helps not to think about the fetters when you work with the fetters, not to think a lot about the fetters when you work with them. Also, the pointers are great. I mean, I never worked like that with the fetters, but the Kevin's pointers are great. They are just not all worked for them, but some of them definitely. And when you think too much about the fetters, then your mind is too much about, okay, did I break this fetter or not? Instead to look, okay, what is happening right now, right here? Are there many underlying beliefs or not? But something that you mentioned, Todd, about Christiane bringing that up, yeah, I think she posted in some of the posts that with the first fetter, the sense of self disappears. It should be gone, which that was not like the belief is gone, but the sense is there. Selfing is there still in different ways. This is, I think, the right label. But the selfing, the sense of self is still there for most of the time, until I think it's 8, right, when they completely collapse. And I think the belief definitely, it gives you, I mean, for me, the first fetter was generally like giving you a real insight of how things are, just to tell, the mind is telling, okay, this is what you believe so far, and this is how the things are. So now from this moment on, you have to, there is still things to do, but, this was very important insight, basically, to see that there was just a belief, and the belief collapsed, but the sense was there. So I don't know if Christiane makes a distinction as Kevin does, but that was my experience.
I think it's about the self. The sense of self gets subtler and subtler, and there are different aspects of it that are remaining and getting subtler and subtler as you examine them through the fetter model until 8, when
right.
That's my understanding.
My perception of the fetter model is that we want to see it in a way much to a binary fashion. My idea is that every one of those fetters has hooks into every other fetter, and that we can't believe that they're going to fall in sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And we can't actually know that they're fallen. We may weaken them to the point where it's not going to get triggered for the next 10 years. So how do we know? We can't know. So this idea that we can break a fetter or not break a fetter is just a conceptual overlay for mind entertainment or something. Surely everything is so complex that we can't fit anything into a paper model like this, really. It's just an indication.
So are you saying you can go back to the self concept then at any minute, do you feel?
Well, I'm saying that we could think that we've broken all 10 fetters, and 10 years later something happens and boom, there it is again. I don't know.
I'm not sure I agree
that
with
would fit with my experience.
Yeah, it's not that's not my experience. That's not my experience.
Yeah, okay.
There are definitely some things. It's also why one of the questions is what don't you doubt anymore? Because there's some things that I'm yeah, I wouldn't say not doubting, but that it's just not happening anymore.
Yeah.
For example, doubt. I never doubt anything.
Yeah, you're not going to go back and remember that Santa is actually real. You're never going to suddenly, oh my God, actually I was wrong. Santa Claus is real. I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate that. Hate that example. It's such a bad example. Such a bad example. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that not knowing whether or not it might pop up again in 10 years' time is doubt. That's not an issue. No, there's no doubt involved in that, what I say there. What I am saying is I don't know. I can't know. That's all.
You can't know, but by the you know, the experiences that we've heard of people who have done it, it doesn't sound like that's actually the case. I mean, I haven't heard of anybody who's really gone through all of them and then had a sudden resurgence of them. Not that we've canvassed everybody who's ever done it, but
sounds great.
Yeah, we'll see.
I'm curious how people think about this. Might it be something like reading a novel? You know, you can still at any time pick up a novel and get engrossed in the story and the characters. And then when you're done with it, you just put it down and you're not thinking about it anymore. Does that fit? So like, you know, I might have a thought that and a sensation that was formerly labeled a craving, which I know obviously and immediately is not a craving. And I might decide to go along with it. And so what? Generally, that's not what happens, but sometimes it does.
Yeah.
Yep. It's also because the whole clue to everything, to all the fetters, is that it's about attachment. So there's if there's no attachment to the craving, that if you want an ice cream, then you just have an ice cream, and there's no attachment to it. So it's not that it's gonna disappear and you're never ever gonna eat an ice cream again. It's just there's just no attachment to it. There's no story about that it's a good thing to have an ice cream or a bad thing to have an ice cream, and you should watch your cholesterol and all of that. There's no stories about it. It's just done.
Yeah.
And it's just an ice cream.
It's just a beer as well, yeah. And if you don't get it, you don't get it.
Just a line of Coke. Fine.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good example with the ice cream. But yeah, I mean, even if you want to have an ice cream, but you're lazy to get it, you're still fine with that, and you're not going to get it.
I think that whole thing too about how will you ever know, and what might happen or may not kind of resurface in 10 years is a little bit irrelevant. I think if you come back to the touchstone of where particular practices or teachings resonate in your own experience, then what may or may not happen in 10 years or next week or whatever isn't sort of overly relevant. I think it just is a conceptual discussion to have.
Yeah, it seems like, as you said, Kathy, it's more of a holding on to, the way we would like things to be, or the way we imagine things to be, or an expectation. And it's more of the trying to get control and all that. And
Yeah.
it doesn't really amount to anything.
You can't really test in your experience whether or not something's going to be the same in 10 years' time or not, can you?
We know for sure that nothing is going to be the same. I mean, that's one of the three impossibles. You know, nothing is permanent, nothing is staying the same ever. Yeah. But I do think that there's some things that is just not happening, or not a concern, or not. I have this thing that if things are not, if things are not easy to do and falling into place, then I leave it. I'm not even trying to be forceful about it, because I know how completely delusional it is, that I think that I just need to apply myself to something. You know, no, things need to be easy and fall into place, and if they're not, then I leave it. And it's not even anything that I'm thinking that there could be another way of it.
I like that.
If it's complicated, just leave it.
I think it comes back to that point that Leona was making earlier on about clarity. Like when you've got clarity, there's no doubt. And it's like Sandra's simple way of pointing back to the doubtlessness of the self-illusion when you see through it. Like, you don't have to complicate it. It's a simple thing, and when it's clear, it's clear. And I think we all know that at some level, don't we? But there would be things that someone could like jump into our Zoom and say, and we would go, you just know at a very basic level that that's not the way things are now anymore. I'm trying to think of what an example might be, but maybe you don't need one. Maybe it's just that we know when we're clear about things without a doubt. And we know that something's changed, I suppose, as well, like that there's a point of no going back in that. That's what I mean by we know that things have changed. It doesn't necessarily point to how any experience will be in the future, because in a way that's just expectation or doubt operating, or hope operating, or something like that. But when there's clarity, it doesn't have to be. That's what I appreciated recently in one of Christiana's Facebook posts, is whether it's a big shift or a subtle shift or something that, you experience something falling away at the time, or down the track, when, like Branimir's example of someone yelling on the street, and you just go, oh, I'm not reacting. The point about it is that it's 100% clarity. And I think we know what that means.
I can definitely also use the pointer with clarity. That was a really good one, Leona.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's always been a big portion of my habitual doubt for everything, including when I was doing the first Fetter and all of that, is because a lot of it would come down to just not having the clarity of knowing how any of this works. And as long as there was that, I mean, like, the past history of this personality is looking from the time that I was little, looking for, I love, like, I mentioned this to Pernilla today, that my favorite books when I was a kid were these like books that gave you facts about everything, and it was like, why do clocks run clockwise, and like it was like all fact stuff, and I ate that up because I think it gave some sense of security, that it was like there was a sense of safety in being able to know why things worked the way they worked, and you felt like you had some sort of grasp on it. But when it comes to this stuff, nobody really knows how any of this really works or why, and I think that's why we get into these discussions of, will it come back in 10 years or not? Well, if we knew exactly why it happened the way it happened, then maybe we would be able to say, but it's a very mysterious process. And that's why we have mystical traditions and scientific traditions and things in between that are all kind of working at it from different angles. But the fact that they are all there for certain personality types, having that lack of clarity on how things actually work, launch me and other people I've spoken with into these kind of perpetual states of doubt, where there's just, you can have the clear experience of it and the experience isn't doubted, but it's the question of there can't even be clarity about whether what you're experiencing is the same thing that somebody else is describing. And so without even being able to get clarity of that, there's still that's why the doubt can just be so persistent, because there's always something that's unclear that you eventually just have to relax into, and have to just be okay with not knowing, essentially.
Well, for me, there was a more basic consideration, which was there was this whole belief structure that is so thick and multi-layered and persistent that even when it's seen that it's all nonsense, they still surface, and then they still have to be refuted. Which fortunately is not a problem, but once in a while I still get surprised by an old belief that comes up, and it's like, well, that's weird, that shouldn't be here. Yeah, I mean, just because we cut the foundation out from under the belief structure doesn't mean that the beliefs don't float around in some sense, and they can still show up.
Yeah.
I just would like to circle back to the part that is always there regarding doubt, and that's the part about time, that delusion about time, and also thinking about if this will still be an issue in 10 years' time. That's assuming that time exists, which is just, again, we're back into that feedback loop that is happening, that we're never ever gonna dissolve that when we have some of the facts that we put into the equation are wrong. Then the result will be wrong. If we sit and assume that time exists and that things are linear, which we know they're not, then we can't even talk about how it's going to look in 10 years' time, since 10 years' time does not exist. And right now it looks great, which means this, and then there's nothing more to talk about. It ends there.
That's such a perfect example, Pernilla, of what I was talking about. It's despite the fact, I take it, that we all see that these are just thoughts and they're meaningless. We keep structuring everything in these terms, and we already know it's nonsense. So it's a persistent habit.
What about that sense of knowing something's changed? Because that's sort of a bit time-based. Well, yeah, and I don't know, sometimes also Anyway, I'll just stop there, because what I'm wondering about with that illusion of time, it's pretty clear when you think about the future, isn't it? And it's sort of clear when you think about the past, but having that sense of something used to operate a bit differently than it does now, that feels kind of clear, but it's hard to talk about exactly.
Yeah,
No, like I don't have the same level of anger that I had before, I think. Yeah.
But the point is that the calm that you feel now was there all along. You just had your headlight pointing in the direction where you saw what aggravated you, but everything was there. You have the 360 around you all the time, and the calm that you have right now, it was there all along, but you just didn't have your headlight pointing in that direction. So nothing has changed. Your focus is just in a different way. It's as soon as we don't assume anything anymore, then everything's different and nothing has changed. Because it's about what the headlight, is pointing at.
Yeah, that's true. That touches into that thing about what is doubtless.
Yes.
Yeah. And outside the realm of doubt or not doubting. That feels like it's unchanging and
Yes.
has never been anywhere to go anywhere. So that sort of doesn't feel bound in time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm gonna head off.
Yeah.
Quite late.
Yes, it is. It is. Does anybody have anything to say as a last minute? Otherwise, I think we're gonna call it a night.
Yeah, here is very much night.
Yes. Yeah, in Vienna. Yeah, you're 1 hour ahead. Yeah.
You're in UK, right?
Yeah.
Well, it also works to say we'll call it a day, which is here.
In Australia. Yeah, I love that.
9 in the morning here.
I would like to say
But the
thank you.
expression means the same thing, call it a day.
Yeah. I would like to say thank you to all of you. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely great. Absolutely love it. And yeah, and I hope obviously that this is going to be useful for everybody watching. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.